Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about how to take your performance to a higher level to avoid killing your company. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Evan Marks. Welcome, Evan.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
I'm so glad you could be here.
Well, thank you.
Can you share some about your background?
So my name's Evan Marks. I started a company in January after being with the company for about 6 years called M1 Performance Group. I'm a mental performance coach. Previous to this, I've been doing this for 7 years. I spent a long time, 25 years on Wall Street, managing money, hedge fund style. Before that, I graduated University of Pennsylvania. I was a lacrosse player for only a year. Blew my knees out twice, which is a big part of my story about reinventing myself. And I love what I do now for a living. I'm very, as we were speaking about before we started this, there was a lot of regret that I spent so much time on Wall Street because I didn't enjoy it as much in the end as I did in the beginning. But I think that regret, as I look back, was so informative and so important to what I do now. So I've learned so much in my experience as a trader, as a portfolio manager, but also as a human being, and how I was raised and how I grew up and mother, father, brothers. So I'm very fortunate that I have the opportunity to work with some incredible clients. They range from professional athletes to C-suite executives to obviously Wall Street. So for me, mental health is everything. And people's success is everything. But before they succeed, I think everybody has to know where they start from. So I'm not a basic motivational coach where I'm not a positive psychology coach, because I think it's important to know that when we're optimistic, we're realistic. So we have to know where we start from and what our struggles and hurdles are, because only there we can build consistent, scalable, leverage performance. And it's important to know how we feel and make conscious decisions. A little extended, but that's what I do.
No, it's great. Well, I guess maybe the first question that I have then is pretty basic, is how did you even, what drew you to this idea of high performance and really trying to help both yourself and others reach their peak performance?
Well, I think in the beginning, I'm 52 years old. I turned 52 last week. And I think mental health I think it's been around, but I think it's become so much more prevalent in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years. But obviously COVID obviously affected everything. Simone Biles, like people came out like this is real. But I think for men, it was still a weakness. And I think for a lot of people it was a weakness. So when I back up and think about my life, I was an identical twin, and I still am, but I had an older brother who was handicapped who passed away. I was raised by a single mother. My father was homeless. We went to Ivy League schools. I blew my knees out twice. So I really had to sit back and understand, I had a lot of emotions. But I think at that point in society or growing up, it was shelved. You couldn't express yourself. You couldn't put words to it. It didn't seem like it was around them. But what happened was that all these emotions started to build up mentally. And there's something called resistance. And as resistance builds, it almost becomes a vault. So I struggled through my career, even though I was successful, but I knew something was wrong. I was never fulfilled. I was definitely not happy, even though I was successful and made money. And up until 2015, I met this incredible coach, and they started talking about psychoanalytical theory and neuroscience and emotions and feelings. I'm like, what the hell is this shit? But once I was able to actually put words to the pain and the experiences I had, and I was not open to this, by the way, I was extremely skeptical, it started to make sense to me. And it wasn't easy at first. But as I started to literally vocalize and see what was going on, and that it wasn't a weakness, it was actually my human experience, I was able now as opposed to going to autopilot, to actually say, I feel this way and I'm allowed to, but I'm also allowed to choose my behavior.
Mm.
So I went from like literally surviving, where surviving just didn't suit me any longer, to actually being able to pick behaviors, which then in turn to new experiences. So I'm like, wait a second, you're telling me I can feel fear, inadequacy, nervousness, and still succeed? And the answer is yes, because all those perceived negative emotions have an incredible intensity. So I can use these quote unquote negative emotions to my advantage.
Mm.
And that's what I did. So now when I'm nervous, I'm like, let's go. I had an assistant for a long time. And he's like, how you feel? I go, nervous. He goes, you're nervous every day. I go, yeah, I know. He goes, but you never act nervous. I go, well, I don't. I said, that's taken a lot of training.
Mm.
Right.
Well,
So that's
I
what I
mean, you're
do. That's
talking.
what performance is about to me sometimes.
Well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I find that true. Even the be true to yourself movement and all the different ways that it's manifested itself kind of drives me nuts, because it's what. But you hit it on the head. It's one thing to say, yes, I can feel this way. Yes, that's true. And I guess honor how you feel,
Permission.
and yeah. But it's another thing to act, like you shouldn't just be like, oh, I can be myself. And if being yourself means being rude, I mean, that's not kind to somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, you can pick
No.
your emotions. Yeah. Or I
But
mean, you can pick your
when you talk
actions.
about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was correcting myself. You can pick your actions. You can't always pick your emotions, but you can pick your actions.
Well, that's the whole thing. You just nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pick your feelings. People will trigger you. If you say
Mm-hmm.
something to me, you may replicate my mother in the past. I
Mm.
don't have a sister, but like somebody in my past. It's not you. There's no way you can affect my emotions and feelings, but there's no way in hell you're going to affect my behavior. Like, that's my
Right.
choice, right? I can't control how I feel, but I sure as hell can control how I behave. And what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, and people, when you hear, and I'm sure when I feel happy, I'll do this. When I'm not as angry, I'll do it. Doesn't work that way. Because what happens is you may feel sad, like, I don't want to work out, I'm too tired, but then you start working out. You may not want to work out, or you may not want to do something. But what happens is when you change your behavior, feelings come next.
Mm.
Not when I'm this, I'll do this. It's when I act, this will come, the feelings, emotion, the intensity will come in. But you may always feel inadequate a little bit, or you may always want to feel validated a little bit. But over the course of repetition, I don't use time that much because that's an assumption. But over the course of repetition and intentionality, things change.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the biggest compliment I get is when clients go, how the hell did I get here? I said, well, I kind of know, right? It's interesting. There's a Harvard research piece out that says when we become outcome focused, our skill set significantly diminishes. How crazy is that? So
And
when we
why is
think
that?
of that, because what happens is when we think we have to be here, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like multitask. We don't focus on what's important now. Right? So I have to do this now, right? So it's almost like sacrifice. It's almost like instant gratification. I know if I keep doing this, I don't know when the result will come, but when it does come, one, it'll be amazing. But most importantly, it will feel deserved. Right? And that's a belief system. If you think about it,
I feel,
I just throw a lot out there.
yeah, I know. I feel very conflicted by that, because my first
Well, tell me.
response, yeah, well, because my first response is, I'm somewhat of a visionary, not like a Steve Jobs visionary, but I can see, like they often say, futurist, right? I can see the future. I can see the steps it takes to get there, right? So I often think about the future, so I can think about the steps to get there, and so that's why I am future focused in that way. And so I wanted to, argue on that side. But then on the other side, I have a very hard time. Let's say I want to be more fit, and I will do something and I'll do it for, let's say, about 30 days and I'll see zero results. And so I'll give up. And it's, I have a very hard time like trusting that if I keep doing this for long enough, it will eventually reach that outcome. And maybe because the steps aren't as clear, I don't know. But so in that way, I can see what you're saying. So I feel very conflicted by what
Well, let
you
me
said.
ask you a question then, Janet. Are you detail oriented? Are you kind of dot guys across the T type of person?
I'm in the middle. I'm
Do you
not,
have people around you who are? Right. So now you have to think about this, right? So you're a visionary, right? You have an end goal. This is what I think it should be. So now, in order to be a great leader, that's very important. But now you surround yourself with people who are capable of dotting I's, crossing T's, right? So
right.
you are thinking this way, but you're smart enough to know, okay, this is the way I'm thinking. I need to fill in people who know how to execute. I got this vision, right? So in a way, we're discussing the same exact thing, but now you're building this organization. So when I say personally, you said working out, you can't hire people to lift weights for you.
Right.
Because it's not going to affect you, right? It's not, their biceps will get bigger, but I don't think yours will. Right? But as a visionary, as somebody on a mission, when we talk about, you think it's called corporate CPR, planning, this is my vision. More people die in the planning stage because they have this vision, but they don't know how to execute. Great leaders, and luckily I've coached so many incredible people, know how to delegate.
Yeah.
Right? They're open-minded. You know what? I'm not good at this. So I'm going to find somebody who's really good at this. Because the details, the process matters to get to where I want to go. Right? So if you think about it, what we just discussed, when you say, well, I don't really agree with that. But in actuality, going back to what we just first said, when behavior changes before feelings, you actually are behaving in a way to accomplish what you want to do. You're just outsourcing.
Yeah.
Find the best people to do it. And that builds what? An incredible culture. As long as we know how to lead with empathy, then we can get into it later.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well,
right? If you think about it though, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm really curious, what are some of the major stumbling blocks that you've seen then over the past decade that prevent people from having high performance?
Well, it's so interesting, right? So now we go psychoanalytic. So it's literally from 0 to 12, maybe 12, 13, because the brain doesn't fully develop to where 25. So how we were raised, how we were validated, all learned behavior. So when you see CEOs, athletes, traders, PMs, it's really not what they're trying to accomplish. It's what they're trying to validate in their past. So if their father, whoever caregiver had an influence on them, they think they're doing something new, but in actuality, they're repeating past behaviors. Even though the environment looks different, but how they communicate with others, how they approach things is actually repeated. So now my job is to actually, as I like to say, untangle the spaghetti and obviously know where we're starting from, because we repeat the same behaviors. So now if we're able to recognize that, accept that, and make a decision to change, it's so impactful, not only for the leader, but there's a trickle down that goes into your culture, right? So, I don't know anything about you, right? I've listened to your podcast and I think they're great. but
Oh,
I've never
thank you.
sat down with you. I don't know you intimately,
Mm,
right? And that's what I do with clients. But all of a sudden, like my job is to listen to what you're not saying. Like, what are the repeated emotional patterns that keep coming up? So once we're able to recognize that, bring it to light, right? So a lot of it's in your head, it's in the darkness. If we can verbalize it, bring it to light, and we understand it, then we get to build a foundation that's a new experience, and then we get to leverage that.
mm. So, I guess take it a little personal here. Like one of the things that well, it makes it easier
It
for
always
people to
goes this way,
relate, I
by the way.
think.
Don't worry about it. Every time
Yeah.
I'm on a
Well,
podcast, it gets very personal.
yeah, well, because I'm actually I'm very reflective, right? So
It's terrific.
and a lot of times there'll be things like I'll ask myself, am I making this decision because it's the best decision, or I'm making it because of some emotion that I'm not really realizing that I have, or some sort of unconscious bias that I'm wanting to make this decision, right? And so I bring that into like the critical decision making. But like one of the things I've never understood is like, how do you really dig in and find the root of things that you can't find the root for? So, and I'll be transparent. For me, like I have this tendency to be angry. I have no idea why I'm angry. And I mean, yeah, I can reflect way back in my life and say, oh, maybe it was because, my parents got divorced, when I was 3, and, and these things. But I have no current emotion tied to that. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't reflect on that and feel angry when I think about it. So like are there techniques then that you use to help people work through, whatever their challenges, whether it's anger or it's fear or it's, any of those negative emotions that aren't helping you?
Right. So remember, so it's an emotion, right? We're just labeling
Mm,
negative and positive. So when you say you're 3 years old, your parents get divorced, right?
mm,
So at 3 years old, even though you're verbal, there's no way you can put your words to your feelings,
right.
right? So believe it or not, so I hear that, you'd be a great client. So I hear this, right? And I say, okay, so when you're 3, your parents are getting divorced, right? You really can't conceptualize, right? Because remember, like emotions happen before intellect, right? Because I'm
Mm,
hungry, I'm wet, right? That's
right.
usually we have to go all the way back to be able to say, I was angry. My parents left. I stayed with my mother. Now we start to untangle. Yeah, I guess I was angry. But what does anger feel like to you? I don't have control. I don't have. So
Mm-hmm.
now we start discussing this, right? So now what's happening? Now it's coming out of your mouth. So now you're getting to see it. But the key is once we start discussing it, watch what happens to your intensity. It starts to come down,
Mm,
right? So now that resistance to the past. Listen, my father was homeless. My mother raised my twin brother and an older brother who's handicapped. My mother did a phenomenal job. She didn't douse my dad. She did whatever she could. She was, worked 2 jobs and she was an incredible mother. However, I never had a real man in my life. So we were always
mm,
taking care of ourselves. So I'm like, it's nothing, but it affects me. So I have to go
right.
all the way back. I said, well, it doesn't make sense. You tell me I got to put words to my feelings. But if you think about it, I was allowed to be angry. And what happens is that when we start putting words to those past experiences,
Mm,
unconsciously, it starts to stimulate our brains and the intensity starts to come down. So when the intensity comes down, we're actually able now in this moment to actually make decisions that are benefiting us now. Because believe it or not, and this may sound nuts because everything sounds nuts when I talk about this stuff, it actually influences your behavior. No, it doesn't, Evan. That's bullshit. I'm 42, I'm 32. I know what I'm doing. No. And what happens though, when you say, and start to become curious, how in the hell is that possible? My job is to make you aware and curious. right? Curiosity is information seeking. I'm not saying we have to scuba dive every single day, a little snorkeling, a little scuba diving to find out what the hell's going on. But when you're able to actually unlock that resistance, what do they say? The truth will set you free. There's a truth to it. So when I speak to you about anger and stuff like that, well, you know, your anger has helped you. It served you, right? You're an entrepreneur. You have this incredible business. I'm going to do this. I'm going to validate myself. Because I don't know if you were validated as a child. Maybe your mother worked so hard, your father wasn't around. I don't know what happened. But you're validating yourself. But at the same point, we want to be recognized.
Right.
This is what she does, right? So now we have to understand, am I self-validating or am I looking for external validation? So now when we're looking for external validation, it's quite different because we were never validated as children. And there's a conflict. Like we all want to be told, great job, you're incredible. Right. But the problem is when you're not internally validated, you don't believe it.
Yeah, and or it even temporary, right? It's a fleeting.
Yeah. Well, motivation is fleeting. Validation is fleeting. If you're not internally motivated, internally validated, it's fleeting.
Yeah.
So how do we get there as leaders, as CEOs? How about this, as human beings? We have to literally, it's very introspective. And we have to go back sometimes. That's why this whole positive psychology stuff, I personally think is bullshit, right? Because I think you can have affirmations if you know where you're starting from. It's gonna be a great day, I'm the best, but you don't believe it. So it takes working through things and say, you know what, man, I'm struggling. Why? Work through it. And now you start, your behavior changes. So when you say, I deserve this, I'm the best, you actually start to believe it. But there has to be work done in order to leverage those affirmations.
Right, because otherwise you feel like you're lying to yourself.
You know, when people go to certain motivation, I won't mention names, and they charge all this money, and it's like a 3-day event, and they get all motivated. They walk in depressed. 2 weeks later, they're 2 times more depressed because now they're all jacked up on dopamine. But they haven't done anything differently. Like nothing's changed. They haven't really untangled what's going on.
So do you have, because one of the key things, and you said it at the beginning, behavior. So again, just keeping this theme of, you know, I said I was angry. I actually figured out now what triggers that anger. And it is if I don't get my way, right? Like I realized.
Now, where do you think that comes from?
Oh, I assumed it still had something to do with being 3-year-old and your parents getting divorced. And yeah. Like, but so, you know, I've done all this thought, right? And so now I realize I get angry, you know, if my daughter doesn't do, you know, what I expect her to, or my husband plays an extra game of golf because that's not what we had talked about, you know, whatever. Like, but I realized I saw this pattern, right? That it's if I don't get my way, you know, almost like the only child syndrome, right?
Well, it's control also, right? Because as a 3-year-old, you have no control what's going on.
Right.
You can't control your parents getting divorced. But now your husband's playing golf, your daughter's getting angry, you're losing control.
Yeah. So you have to change the behavior, right? Because the emotion is going to be there. So what are some of those tangible things that you advise clients then that help start to pivot the behavior? These reoccurring
it's,
behaviors.
you know, it's almost, you know, we always hear about mental models, right? This is a very simple mental model, but it's only simple when you remember to do it, right? It's simple. But what happens is we are unconscious 98% of the time. So we get 3% more conscious and be able to slow down. We can actually do this. So here's a very simple but yet difficult. So I'm angry. My wife's going to play golf. Kids are screaming. And I feel disrespected. Right now, he's just playing golf. But I feel disrespected, but it's not really my husband. There's something in the past. So now I'm angry. So now I give myself space. Okay, I'm feeling angry. I say it. So I just wait a little bit, millisecond. Okay, I'm angry. So now that fight or flight, which is the sympathetic nervous system, goes into parasympathetic. So now it's the intensity, because you didn't react.
Right.
Now we ask a question. All right, I know I'm angry right now. What am I trying to accomplish here? Well, I'm angry that he's doing this, but I don't want to act this way. So I'm going to ask, what time are you going to come home? Or what's wrong with you, sweetheart? But see what happens immediately. Now you have not reacted, right? You're not unconscious. So now the result is your daughter's not screaming and yelling. Your husband's not reacting to you. So now the experience is completely different, right? Why are you playing golf? What the hell are you doing? So now they're defensive. She's defensive. Everybody's defensive. But now it's the same situation. But now you slow it down. You're intentional about how you're about to react. Because now you've taken into account of how you feel. You've given that space. You've chosen a behavior. You've asked yourself a question, what am I trying to accomplish? Whatever question resonates with you. And now you've decided on an action, execution, whatever it may be. But it's completely different. It's conscious. So the more and more we do this, I'm not saying that you will never be angry again.
Right.
However, when you are, that intensity you can use now. Right? So that's just an example. But what happens now is you create a new experience. So now you're allowed to be angry. However, you know how to deal with it better. So now when the brain's always predicting into the future, he's disrespecting me. I have no control. She, which is only probably 6 or 7, she's doing this. You have no idea what she's doing anyway, right? But now, as opposed to you thinking, which is obviously when we predict into the future, it's based in the past. But now that pool is not you being 3 years old, having no control. You actually have control over your behavior. So now when the brain's predicting, it's like, wait a second. I've been angry before, and I haven't lost my temper. I know actually how to cool down and actually make a decision here, where my husband doesn't overreact, my daughter's not overreacting, and nor am I. So the more we do that, we start changing the experience of what anger means, that I'm allowed to feel this way, but I know when I behave this way, there's a different experience. So now what happens? So now when you react from 3 years old, because that's the only thing you know, now there's a different definition what anger means. Anger now is an intensity that it's a feeling, but I know how to use it. So now imagine, let's take it a step forward. Let's go to your workout scenario. Now when I'm angry, I'm going to let everybody chill. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to use the intensity of that anger to actually something that's going to really benefit me. So now the result of that anger is what? You're in better shape. So we're using the intensity of that to serve you, not to hurt you. Where that anger and that control was survival based because you had to have it growing up, but that no longer serves you at this age. So how do we use that feeling to serve us? Interesting, right?
Absolutely.
It's so counterintuitive sometimes, but it's fascinating.
And just because some of my team listens to this show now, and I'm not an explosive, angry person. I don't.
No, I'm not saying you are, but we have anger. I'm not saying
that
you're a
is
complete
example.
lunatic.
No.
I'm just saying we have that. Yeah.
Yeah. No. No, I'm the other end. I'm the passive aggressive angry one. Who's like, sits around and pouts and expects everybody then to be, bowing to my whim or whatever. But anyway, I guess one of the things I'm curious that might help people though is if they're starting to get into this and starting to do some of this work and really like, hey, I want to take my performance to the next level. How do I even start to identify these things? Are there some, like, do you recommend journaling, or what is there a process that helps people, kind of start to uncover these things about themselves?
Yeah. So it's interesting it's funny you say journaling. I think it's so important.
Mm.
But when people think journaling, they think negative. I got to journal what's going on in my head. I have horrible feelings right now. But you have to, some people are unable to feel anger because they
Mm.
just want to get rid of it, they shelved it. So sometimes people don't even know what joy feels like. So whatever emotion you're having, if you want to journal, because journaling obviously is out of your head into the light,
Mm-hmm.
write it down. I'm feeling this. Have it, like I tell PMs and traders, put a check mark when you have a feeling. Recognize it, acknowledge it. So the more we're able to say, for my clients, I say always verbalize, right? Even on a trading desk, say it lightly. When I speak on stage, I'm always nervous. I'm very nervous right now. I acknowledge it. The intensity comes down. Start to really be a student of yourself and acknowledge what anger feels like, what fear feels like. I'm fearful right now, right? So now what we start to do actually start to build a dictionary of ourselves, right? Because your fear, your nervousness may be different from my nervousness.
Right.
How I feel is different because we have different experiences. But when
Mm-hmm.
we really start to really pay attention to how we feel, and I'm not saying like, well, I felt fear. It's got to come out somewhere because when it stays in your head, it doesn't come to the light. So you can't see it. I thought that. I was thinking that. But when you're able to verbalize, write it down, it's a
Mm.
starting point. And you start to build your own personal dictionary of these are my feelings.
I've heard of people having challenges even identifying the feeling that they're having. So how do you help them with that?
So the great question. So obviously there's so many layers. It's like an onion. Like I feel nervous, but is it really nervous or is it fear? Is it fear or is it regret? Is it regret or is it anger? Right? So the first thing is to say, I feel nervous. And
Mm-hmm.
literally sometimes, I know this sounds nuts. I always pronounce this word wrong, a thesaurus. Is it thesaurus or thesaurus?
Thesaurus.
Thesaurus, yeah. I get it wrong. Open up a thesaurus and look at some
Mm.
words.
Mm.
You know what? I'm not angry. I'm more frustrated or whatever, that's how I feel. So when you can really define the word, it really opens up, right? Because, they're very vague words.
Yeah.
Disturbed, angry, anxious. I mean, we can go on and on. But when you can really clearly define the feeling, it's almost like a key that opens up this vault of resistance. But like anything else, though, it takes a lot of introspection. But all successful leaders, believe it or not, do this. It's amazing to me when I coach elite people. I've never seen people work harder in my life. It's literally the people at the top of their game are there for a reason. They are the most
Mm.
curious, open-minded, self-development. I don't got it yet. People. They'll do whatever it takes. I think if I said you got to stand on your head for 14 hours to get a couple, I think they do it. They literally will experiment with themselves in order to get better.
It's interesting because you often people who aren't at that level, we like to judge other people, or we look at people's highlight reels, right? And oh, it must be so easy for them, they have it so easy. And oh, it drives me nuts when people are like, why do CEOs get paid multi-million dollars? I'm like, are you responsible for $1 billion company and all those jobs and all that stress? And like, you don't realize how much stress that person has to take on to run a Disney or to run a Walmart. And I don't know like what CEO compensation should be, but I'm just saying that, you know, the responsibility of being a cashier versus running Walmart is substantially different. Like substantially, the amount of stress and performance and, you know, the weight of making sure that the business stays viable. So I mean, I guess I don't know where I wanted to go with my
No,
question.
but I'll go. Can I take a
Yeah,
step?
yeah.
Can I take that?
Hmm.
So obviously, I'm not sitting on boards discussing people's compensation,
No.
but I will tell you this much about CEOs and C-suites. They obviously get paid more. But if people who are underneath them, if you don't think they think about their responsibility and that you have a family and the pain that goes on with them about how to run things and the torture they go through, not every CEO is a psychopath.
Right.
These are real human beings who lose sleep consistently because they're worried about somebody else. There is such a massive human side to people that unfortunately news is news and we demonize a lot of things. But you would be, well, you're not because you do what you do. People would be so surprised about how human people are at the top
Mm.
and the pain, the struggle, the torment they go through to be actually thoughtful, responsible, good people.
Yep.
Yeah. And unfortunately, but they have to cut things for the greater good. But don't think they don't lose sleep. Always lose sleep. But this is their
Mm.
responsibility,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I mean, a perfect example is like, you know, I used to work at Target. When I was a manager at Target, I could go on vacation and I didn't think about work at all. Um, I'm about to go on vacation in June, and I'm like, you know what? This will be my first vacation where I think I'll take zero work calls, but I'll still be checking my email and I'll still be responding. Like, I mean, I know I can't not do that. I'm like, oh, because I got to make sure the money's there for payroll, and I've got to make sure that, you know, when you're at, towards the top of an organization, your span of responsibility is so broad that it really is hard to be like, I'm not going to do anything and not think about all those people who are dependent on me while I'm enjoying Italy, you know, like,
Well, that's another different thing, by the way, resetting
mm,
and being able
mm,
to detach. You know, when I start with CEOs, what you just said is resonates obviously with I think with 98% of CEOs is okay, let's just take one night off. Let's go with
mm,
significant other, whatever, one night and just be present because we go into
mm-hmm.
work-life balance. So when people say 50-50 work-life balance, it's so full of shit.
Yeah,
If I said to
completely.
you, you could be 70-80 work, 20% family, but I'm going to say, I'm going to be able to make you so present in both. You're like, I'm in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
80-20 is a success. 70-30 is a success. 50-50, there's no
Oh, and it
CEO
also
in the world that's
changes.
50-50.
Right, but it also changes. Meaning there
Everything
might come a time
changes.
where no, but I mean like maybe your child's sick, right? And so you need to put more 80% into your family and 20 into business, or you know, maybe you've got deadline. Like I think there's a bit of fluidity to it, and you've got
Well,
to
listen,
know.
so when I
Hmm,
say 80-20, right, that 20's got to be 100% in,
I know,
right?
yeah, I knew it.
That's
Mhm.
what I mean by that.
Yep,
So when you
yep.
go to Italy for a week, that's 6 days compared to everything else you spend at work. And you said, Ev, I was so present. I really, I felt work, I recognized it, and I put my phone down. I didn't answer.
Mm.
And I was so present with my children, my husband. I was so proud of myself because I worked at this and I really enjoyed myself. That may be 20% of your whole life because you do so much at
Right.
work. That means you're 100% present with them. That's
Hmm.
incredible.
No, the thing that's scaring me, like, is because it's 14 days or 16 days. So that's why. But I'm not
I
going
love
to
Italy,
do
by the
any
way, but go
calls.
ahead.
I'm not going to do any calls. Like, that's an advancement for me. I'm like, we're canceling everything. But I'm sure I'll still check email. But
But
no, but
before
that
you
is
go
my.
on this trip, though, right?
Mm,
Because Italy's one of the greatest countries ever. That's one
yeah.
of my favorite countries. And my honeymoon was there. I've been to weddings. I've been there
Okay.
multiple times. But now, it's called preparation, right? So you've
Yeah.
hired this incredible culture
Yeah.
and said, guys, it's important to me to spend time with my family in Italy. I haven't taken away. This is the responsibility I expect from everybody.
Mm,
If you really do need me, you can always get me.
yeah.
But I really want to enjoy myself. I want to be present with my family. You have to be willing to say that. And you know
Hmm.
what's interesting now? When you give people responsibility and you trust them, your phone won't ring. It won't.
No, I'm expecting this vacation to be much different than any of the ones I've had in the past, actually, because well, we don't have to go into all that, but I plan to handle it a lot
Offline, I want to
differently.
hear
That
your travel itinerary because I'm so jealous. Yeah.
well, yeah, because we got a villa in Tuscany. It was a
Oh,
prize, so it's pretty cool.
Florence is
Um,
one of the most beautiful. Are you going to go
mm,
to Cinque Terre to the fishing
you
villages? It's
know,
so
yeah,
gorgeous.
I would love to, and my husband says it says we are, but I thought you had to book now in advance to do that, like because they're limiting people. But he said no. So yes, supposedly we are. I'll
You got to
believe it
go.
when I see it.
The
Yeah.
buildings, the colors are so
Oh,
beautiful.
I know. It's amazing.
Oh,
But
outside of, oh, you're gonna love it.
yeah, I'm excited. The last time I was in Italy was in '99, and it was just like it was Florence, which is beautiful, like you said,
It's
and then
beautiful.
Rome, and that was it.
Then you got to go to
Um,
Siena. Are you guys gonna go to
mm,
Siena?
mm-mm.
Put it on your list. Write it down. You have to go to
Okay.
Siena, this beautiful little village where I love Italy. Sorry. I should digress. Yeah. But you know what's interesting though? So if I can
Mm,
digress for a second, but
mm,
that's life, that's experiences, right?
yeah.
To experience new things. And that's what behavior does also. When we're not in survival base, when we're not always tied to the familiar, we get to really experience this existence,
Mm,
right? And so what you're discussing, if I can say, like, I'm so tied to work. This is my organization, but it's so unfortunate if you can't enjoy Cinque Terre, if you can't enjoy Florence and be there in the moment, because that's what life's about, these
mm.
experiences. I'm not minimizing your work.
No.
We could flourish and we could crush it at work, but we also can enjoy our lives.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's why I expect this trip to be different than the ones in the past 3 years when we grew from 15 people to 70 in a year. Like it was
In one
insane
year,
in 1 year. And so like it's just been insane, right? Like so we've had to wear multiple hats, but now we're stable. We have a lot of people. I have people I trust, so there's gonna be little things I need to check in on, but nothing. I don't expect to be any emergencies that I'm the one who has to solve because there's enough leaders in this organization now that I don't have to be putting out fires every day.
but when you wake up in the Tuscan countryside with the olive trees and the air that smells like BC, if you're feeling stressed or anxious, I want you to
Mm.
go outside, no shoes because it's beautiful out. Feel that earth. Say, I'm feeling a little stressed right now. I feel a little anxious. I want you really to give yourself permission to say it and
Mm.
watch what happens because that feeling, 10 minutes later, as you're having an incredible espresso or cappuccino or a nice, whatever you're going to eat,
Vino.
it's gone. Or a glass of vino or a nice Negroni. I mean, it doesn't matter what time.
Right.
That feeling will be gone, by the way,
Mm.
as long as you're able to acknowledge it and express it. And I expect a note when you come back. If I did that, it was amazing. I felt stressed in the morning. Before you know it, we're in Bruna de Ripoli at a Bastia having the greatest ragu of my life.
Yeah. No,
But try that
done.
out because it seems so
Yeah.
simple, like when you asked me that question earlier. But the real skill set is reminding yourself to do it.
Hmm.
I think
So
the thing.
yeah, no, I for sure, and I'll let you know. I guess my last question before we do the wrap up is, is there an anecdote you want to share or an experience that you want to share, something that would really resonate with our listeners about the power of what this will do for you, this
Yeah,
growth
I
that
do
this will
actually.
do. Mm.
I have a mantra, and it's a very simple mantra, but sometimes it gets misunderstood. You have to slow down to speed up.
Mm.
So what that really means is when we say slow down, doesn't mean take your foot off the pedal, but slowing down actually means intentionality. So my job as a coach is to bring the unconscious conscious. But what happens along the way is that we become unconsciously conscious, which means that we start building behaviors that become repetitive and start becoming a part of our operating system. So when we're able to slow down, like we acknowledge things and be really intentional, we start to really, really develop, right? It's habit formation, it's behavior formation. It's just literally what you're really doing is building. Now we're going to neuroscience, new neural pathways in your brain, right? Because we know old habits, right? There's literally a groove in your brain, and there's obviously circuits, and there's a piece of myelin, which is almost like coaxial cable. There's a sheath around them. That's why habits are hard to break. That's why when we do things, it's simple because we just do them autopilot. So when we start to build new habits, it's new crevices, new neurotransmitters, synapse,
Mm.
the whole 9 yards of new things. So when we're intentional in the beginning, it starts to speed up. The reason why it's like a hockey stick, because we really put the effort in. So now when I speak to clients a month, 2 months later, we don't talk about the same stuff anymore because we were so intentional what we had to do. And that takes work and effort. Now we're just, my game is stretching and leverage. And now we're off. And the
Mm.
great part is that they now believe about intentionality because it works for them. They've seen it happen. Now we go back a little longer because they've experienced it. So they can feel nervous, right? Remember, procrastination is not the lack of effort. It's actually the fear of a future feeling.
Mm.
So now when we start to think about this stuff, well, it's intellectual, but we actually now have done it. We've experienced it. And now we really start to pick up. So my antidote, my mantra is you need to slow down before you speed up. Pretty cool, right? And you can still have your foot on the gas, but you just got to know what the hell we're doing.
Yeah. No, I mean, like you have to, yeah, exactly. I think that's excellent. And intentionality is something, I went on a yoga retreat, and they were talking about, and it wasn't actually a yoga retreat. It was a retreat with my daughter at a yoga place, and on the wall they had this thing talking about, I can't remember what they called it, but it was basically um meditation that you did while doing chores. Like it was like literally they're like, hey, do some chores because it's a form of meditation, but it's the intentionality of doing the chores that you lose everything else around you. And I've noticed that, like, that I actually do, if I'm having a frustrating day or something, I will actually go clean the counters or do the dishes or whatever, because if you can focus on that and let everything else go away. And I know that's not exactly what you're talking about there, but the
A little bit.
intentionality of focusing on chores can be actually release the stress.
Well, supposedly, which I don't believe this at all, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos love doing their own dishes. I still have a tough time really understanding this one, but basically it's for the same reason what you just said, because they're really
Mm.
focused on what they're doing, they're present,
Mm.
right? They're using their hands, and it really enables them to detach. But the cool thing is they've chosen to do the dishes, like you choose to do the dishes, because it's a behavior that benefits you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still don't believe they do it, though,
Oh.
but supposedly I think they do. But it's so funny you say that because yeah, I personally don't like doing dishes, but somehow I still end up doing them all the time. Yeah.
I don't like doing the dishes, but I do them sometimes when they I need to do the dishes. But no, would love to hear then. I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel we could
This
talk
could
for
go on
hours.
forever, by the way. We didn't even get into
Yeah, but
travel.
would love to hear what 3 things you will want to leave top of mind with the audience.
I think top of mind one is discipline is self-care, right? We have to think of ourselves as number one. When we think about everybody else and pleasing, nothing is accomplished if we don't take care of ourselves first. It is selfish not to prioritize ourselves. Because what happens is if we're not taken care of by ourselves, if we don't treat ourselves well, the ripple effect is not positive. When we're healthy and we can slow down and be conscious of what we're doing, the people that we love, the people that we feel responsible for, the people that are expecting from us or in an organization, they benefit. That's one. Number two is kindness, forgiveness is important to ourselves, but without action behind it, just like knowledge, it becomes an excuse. So when we give ourselves kindness, when we give ourselves forgiveness, we have to act on that also, where we have to take action. And the third thing is, we always have to remember that our beliefs count. When we set boundaries for ourselves, when we set assumptions, we are limitless. Watch what happens, what we discussed today. If we start taking action, we start believing differently, our capability gap is astronomical. And the reason why it's astronomical is because we never got it. We always can grow. It may not be linear, right? I was a Wall Street guy for 25 years, 23, 25 years. I'm a coach now for 7.5 years. I'm not even close to where I can be. I'm an investor in businesses. I'm not even close. I still go to school. I still expand my knowledge base. I still meet new people. And that's important. We're always growing. We're always evolving. Embrace that. I got 10 more, but
I'm sure. Yeah, those are fantastic, though.
But it's so important that we're human beings, love ourselves, respect ourselves. We have struggles. Life is not linear. Be good to yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, how can folks learn more about what you do or get in contact with you?
So for this podcast, I'm just going to go to it right now because I had it pulled up and I just lost it. So my website is www.m1performancegroup.com. Before this podcast, we developed a page called m1performancegroup.com/corporate. So on that landing page is questions, like coaching questions. There's a great webinar about the mental model, the M1 mental model. And it's actually, if you're really intrigued and this stimulated your unconscious, there's a discovery call that you can actually reach out to me on. And that's at the bottom of this page.
Excellent. Yeah, and we'll have all of that on the landing page of our podcast. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope you have an incredible time.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd love to see some pictures.
All right, deal. And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.